Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology. Happy Monday, everybody. Today, we're going to take a look at Mars's opposition to Pluto in light of the fact that there is a lunar eclipse coming up this week. It's really an important transit to look at because it's coming right on the heels of the lunar eclipse, which is going to amplify the power of the transit, which is already a really powerful transit anyway. So that's what we're going to do today. In the meantime, I want to remind you all that my new course, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, is coming up. It starts on June 13th. We are getting more and more registrations as we're getting closer to the start date. It's a 12-month program. It's about it's about a year long, just a little under a year actually, and it's about 30 classes plus 12 guest lectures, 100 hours worth of course content. We take a look at the philosophical and spiritual underpinnings of the practice of ancient astrology, as well as all the techniques, methods, history. It's a great program for people who are looking to solidify their love of astrology and perhaps being able to read for other people. Many people take the program simply because they want to deepen their own spiritual lives. They love astrology. Some people read for others, some people a combination of both. It's a fantastic program with a lot of support. It's very well structured. We have breakout study sessions in between modules that are led by staff. And I'm there with tutoring help year round by email. We have a chat room, a forum discussion where people can talk over the material throughout the year, look at charts together. We also have optional reading assignments and quizzes and bonus lessons that you can take and all sorts of stuff. So toward the end of the program, we host a series of live clients that I read for. Then we take about 60 to 90 minutes afterward to break down the readings and give you a sense of how these techniques are actually employed. Toward the end of the program, we also look at how modern depth psychology, archetypal astrology can be blended with the more concretely predictive sort of karmic science that is ancient astrology. So it is a bridge program in terms of the style. We're looking at ancient astrology, and I call the program Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic for that reason. Anyway, if you have any questions about it, you can email me, info@nightlightastrology.com. I'm glad to try to answer any questions you might have. Again, we start on June 13th. Classes run about 2 to 3 hours at a time. They're live, but they're recorded and housed for you online so that you can follow along at your own pace if the timeline doesn't work for you for the live classes. They're all recorded and you can keep them. So there's an early bird payment. You save about $500 off if you register before the start of class. There's a payment plan. There's also tuition assistance for people who are in need. So check those things out, and I hope to see some of you in class soon. All right, so let's take a look at Mars's upcoming opposition to Pluto. So you can see this starting to form right now in the sky. Here's Mars at about 19 degrees of Cancer. Pluto's currently at 26 degrees of Capricorn. And if we move this chart along little by little, you're going to see that Mars makes the opposition to Pluto about June 5th into June 6th. You could even wind it up a little bit and say June 4th through the 6th is kind of this very intense window for the Mars-Pluto opposition. Now, why is that significant? Because it's being sandwiched in between eclipses. Check this out. So if we go forward 2 days from now, you're going to see the lunar eclipse in Sagittarius. There it is. And then so lunar eclipse on Wednesday the 26th, you go forward to the 4th through the 6th, and Mars is opposing Pluto. And then right after that, on June 10th, we get the solar eclipse in Gemini with Mercury retrograde. So when you have a Mars-Pluto dynamic, it's intense anyway, but then you're sandwiching it in between eclipses and it becomes really powerful. So what is the takeaway from something like this? Well, the simple thing is to understand what Mars-Pluto is all about and how that dynamism can affect the eclipses, or how the eclipses can affect that transit. They're playing off from one another. So first of all, Mars is debilitated right now in Cancer, the sign of its fall. A sign that often indicates that Mars will fall on hard times, that Mars things will be a little bit more difficult, that Mars/Moon things will be a little bit more difficult. Someone sent me a headline and I was just like, man, this world, what was it in the headline? It was water gun fight turns deadly. It was something like that. And I was like, oh my God, like what is wrong with this world? So at any rate, I have no idea what that story was even about. I didn't even read the story. I just saw the headline and I was like, oh my gosh. But anyway, there was a shark. I mentioned, you guys, I think I told you when I first was forecasting Mars going into Cancer, moon, water sign, I said there's always like someone who dies by a really bad shark attack during Mars opposite or Mars and Cancer. And sure enough, there was some big surfing story, a shark attack. Someone died, I think. Anyway, so Mars opposite Pluto is going to be a little bit more potent when Mars is in Cancer, because you're talking about a combination of Mars and the moon. So deaths in the family, losses of pregnancies, troubles around, violence and like domestic violence, like anything that's kind of Marsy, god of war, god of conflict and strife, and lunar, which is much more vulnerable, right? We're talking about the emotional, psychosomatic body, our environments, home, family, women, children, the home and hearth. So when those two come together, it can be very difficult. Now what we're doing is we're adding in that kind of nuclear explosive dynamic from Pluto. And that makes the potential for these already difficult Mars moon types of things to become that much more volatile and explosive. And we're going to see this, within a 3-degree range of the two opposing one another. So that looks like about May 31st. Really all the way through about June 10th, which is the day of the next eclipse. So when you're having that kind of that building tension in between eclipses, it is very likely that there will, for some people, not for everyone, but for people who are especially getting this during, say, a perfection year that's ruled by Mars, or say you're getting this during a zodiacal releasing period that's ruled by Mars. Whatever the case might be, if Mars is activated in your chart, or if the transit of Mars and Pluto are activating planets in your chart by, say, squares, conjunctions, or oppositions, especially, these transits are going to pop. And this isn't the good kind of pop for the most part. Sure, the catharsis created by Mars opposite Pluto has the effect of being deeply healing in the end, transformative, regenerative, maybe. The reason I say maybe is because what I've noticed over years of doing this is the basic criteria for whether or not someone will have a really dynamic, possibly difficult, but ultimately redeeming transit experience is whether or not they're taking care of themselves, whether or not they're leading some kind of spiritual lifestyle every day. If they're not, it's like it's harder for the event to not have been traumatizing and need a lot longer to process for those people who even it's no guarantee either. Even for people who do have a daily spiritual practice, some things are just really difficult. You're not necessarily going to be able to roll with it as easily, and that's okay. Like it's life, so sometimes it's like that. But what I would recommend right now for everybody out there, knowing that this transit is coming in the early part of June, is get yourself in spiritual shape. Like if there's something right now, or some area where you need to, tighten up in order to take care of yourself a little bit more, set something aside that isn't working for you, a bad habit, a bad relationship, something you need to be honest about, something that needs to be confronted, perhaps gently or tactfully. Do those things now. Get to work on them now, because when this transit comes, I've just noticed over the years that, Pluto Mars transits, when they're triggering things natally, for people who are, sort of sitting on their hands, not doing the tough work, not addressing something, these transits tend to be very volatile. They feature big blowups of pent up energy that should have found easier, slower release valves. It's like the pressure mounts beneath oftentimes because we're not taking care of ourselves. We're not finding natural ways to let that energy out. Mars Pluto is very volcanic, very eruptive. And remember, in the month of June, Uranus and Saturn are coming to square one another as well. So you're talking about a lot of kind of titanic forces coming to meet in the next month. This is another one of the most dynamic times of the year. We can fall asleep a little bit in between periods that are a little less intense, but this is big because, if you roll it forward just a little bit, what are we looking at? If you go into June a little bit more, We're looking at what here about, the 13th, mid June, just 10 days later after Pluto, Mars, then we have Uranus, Saturn. So this Pluto Mars thing that happens, the after effect of which could be serious dismantling of structures in our lives, or serious rebellion or breakdown, or innovation and originality, and the need to let go of, or what do I want to say? Not let go of, but examine those things that we are too rigid, or areas of life in which we're too contained, where there's too much doubt, or there's too much, there's limiting beliefs somewhere, and the potential for breakthroughs around those things are tremendous in the month of June. At the same time, if we're not being careful about what needs to be discussed, what needs to be confronted, if we're just trying to barrel through with something, we'll get slowed down, and things will break down, and more intense systematic breakdowns will occur. So I'm just looking at this now, myself, and going like, I need to be very careful about anything that's kind of building under the surface is calling for my attention. And I'm just trying to plow through. So the Mars is like that. Mars is like the hero that trudges up the hill, and the hero's getting pounded on the face and shot with an arrow and clipped with a bullet, and it's just like, I'm just almost like a zombie. Like, I must get to the end and be the hero. Well, Mars in the moon sign, there will be casualties, and the casualties will be those who are more vulnerable. If you steamroll right now, the casualties are going to be hurt feelings, or hurt people, or vulnerable people, or places in your life. So you have to be really careful of that. At the same time, you can't try to deny or seal away and not address things that need to be addressed. So it's a tricky situation, knowing how volatile it could be to steamroll people, but also how volatile it could be to let things get pent up. So at any rate, my main message for today is knowing that Mars and Pluto is coming, this big moment of kind of cathartic release of energy that can be sort of violent and destructive. And knowing that right on the heels of that, Uranus, Saturn, this sometimes call for intense challenges to structures, and a call for reformation, or some feelings of resistance, sometimes resistance to change that needs to happen. Sometimes also the need to change and work through different obstacles or forms of resistance, even though the change is absolutely necessary, but there'll be like blockages that come up. So these two areas, these two transits in June, again, very intense. We should start preparing for it now. Now, what does that mean given that the eclipses are coming? Well, the first eclipse in a couple of days, we're going to discuss. The most important thing will be to understand where that eclipse is happening in your life. Therefore, and then alongside of that, we will look at where Mars and Pluto are in the charts coming into the early part of June. You can understand those two parts of life are working very dynamically. And then the third part will be the Uranus-Saturn transit in June. So we're going to track each one of those through the houses to give you guys a sense of where in your lives those transits are coming, and therefore where the sequence of events is most likely to hit in order. And that's a kind of a complicated thing to track, but it should be pretty easy if we just break it down piece by piece. So that's what we'll do in the week ahead, starting, in 2 days from now when we take a look at the lunar eclipse in Sagittarius. So that lunar eclipse in Sagittarius, again, is happening on May 26th. And you could feel the effects of it, I'd say, from the 25th through the 27th. The other thing to note about eclipses is that eclipses may form on a particular day, but oftentimes you're not going to really feel the effect of an eclipse for, sometimes months, or it will have a way of toning or setting the tone for at least the next couple of weeks. And more like, I kind of just think of them as, for example, if it's a lunar eclipse, it's a full moon. So a mega full moon. It's a very, very powerful charged full moon. And if you know what area of life that's happening in, then you know where the fault lines are starting to form with regard to the upcoming Mars-Pluto transit. So I will be reminding everybody of this when we look at the lunar eclipse in 2 days. Anyway, so today, just a little bit of a preview of where things are heading. I hope it was helpful for all of you. What are you already seeing? Where are you feeling the pressures mounting right now? I'd love to hear the feedback from you guys. Where do you feel like there are breakthroughs that are ready to happen? That remember that the positives of these is that if we're preparing ourselves and if we're really taking the time to check in and get a feeling for what's going on, then when these transits come, we don't go into reaction mode. We don't get into reactivity around them, which is easily the best way to totally sabotage ourselves with such powerful transits. So, all right, that's what I've got for today. More in the days ahead. I hope you guys are having a good one, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye.